Welcome to the Tuesday, May 9th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Linney.
Here.
Director McIntosh. Here. Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I'm here.
And Director Chan is absent, excused. President Katz.
Here. We move to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items and agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting, and also at this time will be heard when the item is up for discussion prior to the board's recess to consider closed session items. Madam Secretary, are there any hands for public comment?
There are no hands for public comments, but it looks like we have someone for public comment in person.
I see.
Okay, one moment.
We'll receive the documents, and I will call in Yvette Rivera.
And these are the documents that we provide people that we emailed this morning.
What's that sound?
Sounds like a helicopter.
What?
Sounds like a helicopter.
No, it's a tamper outside.
No, it's a vibration.
They're working on the street there.
Oh.
When you go around that curve, you see that.
I came in the other way.
Oh, okay. That's right, you walked over here.
No, I got a ride. I got dropped off this morning.
You may begin, Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. I provided a few documents this morning to the HR committee meeting, and just quickly, I told them that at the district they've been deploying these boards for employees to write on a capsule scroll, and I provided the district a few comments, well actually the only comments that were provided at AMC shops before the paper was taken down. Trump 2024, Alex Jones was right. A few other comments, but I said this morning that instead of the scroll for the time capsule, that the district should insert lawsuits that have been filed against the district so that history doesn't repeat itself in 100 years. What was included was the ruling on the Shante Scott's case, where the district tried to throw that case out. The Masard Hardrow case, where he filed a lawsuit by himself. Shante Scott's witness list, and my response to Sophia Skoda's determination letter. The list that I provided you today includes the names of the 45 exhibits. I'll be providing those exhibits at a future date. One document that I'm going to give you at the 1 o'clock meeting that only Director Andy Katz received right now is a document labeled United States District Court, Saji Pierce, Ariel Bland against EBMUD, Craig Spencer and Laura Costa. It's the joint exhibit list. It's 267 pages of exhibits, exactly 1,271 listed exhibits, and all of you will receive it. I wanted to save it for the 1 o'clock meeting for distribution, but I would say it's like a beautiful trailer to a great movie. And maybe one day there will be a movie, and hopefully all of you guys will get to pick who will play you in that movie. But in the meantime, this trial starts on May 26th. It was moved from Monday to Friday. I know I'm going to be there. One thing I want to end with is to say that I am going to be filing a writ of mandate to get public records. And I am going to, I guess I feel that the public deserves to know whether or not employees of the district in the position of general counsel, general manager, employment law subject matter expert, and the equity office, whether or not they really are qualified for those jobs. So I look forward to that day. Thank you for your time. I yield.
Thank you. Are there any other hands raised for public comment?
No other hands for public comment?
Seeing no other public comment, we will now convene to Conference Room 8 to discuss closed session agenda items. We are scheduled to return for our regular meeting at 1:15 p.m. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 9th, 2023, regular meeting of the Board of Directors. We will receive reports from this morning's Planning Committee and Legislative Human Resources Committee under item 16. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman?
Present.
Director Lenny?
Here.
Director McIntosh?
Here.
Director Patterson?
Present.
Director Young?
I'm here.
Director Chan is absent excused. President Katz?
Here. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
for all.
There are no announcements from closed session. We move on to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments on non-agenda items?
There are no hands online for public comment, but I do have one person in the audience for comment.
Okay, I see Yvette Rivera coming up.
Okay, thank you. So you're speaking on an agenda and non-agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Yvette Rivera, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This morning I spoke at the HR committee meeting and also at the closed board session. I provided documents to the board director, president, and at this meeting, the rest of the board members received the United States Court, Northern District, Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland document that has 121 listed exhibits, 267 pages of exhibits or evidence that are going to be, I guess they're submitted to the court for consideration. The pages are listed in quadrants of 4 for each sheet because I wasn't going to print out 267 pages. I have to laugh because when I flick through it, it reminds me of 35 millimeter film. That's why I mentioned this morning that it's like a trailer to a movie that's going to come out. And of course, I said this morning that the board members are going to probably want to pick which actors are going to portray them in the movie. Of particular interest in this document, I really was like blown away by quite a bit of it. This morning, I did say that I was going to submit a writ of mandate for employment records. Now that I've had a chance to glance through this, I am going to expand that list. And it's just of East Bay MUD employment applications. I'm not asking to look at the personnel documents and their personnel files, just the application that employees file to get a job at the district. And I'm going to expand that to a few of the people mentioned in this exhibit list, like Corinne Darrow, and a woman that's going to be a witness for the district that received an enormous amount of training on the job. I don't have to mention, well, I will mention her name, Andra Gunderson. I'll be asking for that work document too. The reason why I think it's important, not only to the district, but to the public to know whether or not people are qualified for the jobs they take, not only are they getting paid over $200,000 a year, but they have the power to influence policy. I know that Derek McDonald mentioned at a public board meeting that he was mentored by Craig Spencer. I'd like to know more about what was his qualifications when he applied for a job here at the district. Also, Lourdes Matthews, the director, Derry Moten. I know that I heard him say that he was unemployed as an HR manager and worked for Color Tile for a year, and also worked at a place where he worked with witches. So I'd like to look at his employment application too, to see where, so I could piece together where his prior work experience came from before he was hired for
Thank you.
a
Thank you, Ms.
high-paying job.
Rivera.
May I finish
Your-
my statement?
Your time has expired.
I know, but you have discretion to let me just say one more thing. May I?
You can have one more sentence or two more sentences.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to the trial that was postponed from Monday, the 22nd, to May 26th, Friday. Anybody can join. It starts at 9 o'clock and goes till 1. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you. We move to the,
Go ahead.
I have a question for clarification, Ms. Rivera. Are you submitting a new Public Records Act request for these records? Given that some of these requests are new, and if so, can we see that in writing?
I'm actually going to provide the exhibit list that the district provided me of all the documents that I've asked and all of the reasons the district used to deny me public records. So the work employment records will be a part of that large request to the state court as a writ. So yes, I will be, the employees that I just mentioned right now will be a part of a new one, but all of it will be combined for the writ of mandate for the court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
we now move to the consent are there any other speakers for public comment?
No other speakers for public comment?
All right, seeing none in the room, we'll move to the consent calendar, items 1 through 10. Are there any comments from the public on the consent calendar items?
No
Okay.
one online for public comment?
All right, then we I will ask for a vote on the consent calendar, a motion and a second, or any items to be removed. Consent calendar has been moved and seconded. Is there a motion to approve items 1 through 10? Excuse me, is there all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries.
Director McIntosh and Director Patterson?
That's correct, thank you. We move to determination and discussion, item 11, Director Chan.
Yes, so first we have Kathy Viatella, our Manager of Legislative Affairs. I'll provide our legislative update. The Leg HR Committee this morning unanimously supported the recommended support positions on two bills, AB 735 and AB 1423. Kathy?
Thank you, General Manager Chan, and good afternoon, President Katz and directors of the board. So we did discuss two bills for support positions, and the committee voted, as the general manager stated, unanimously to support both. The first one is AB 735 by Assemblymember Berman. He's a member from Menlo Park, and it's a workforce development bill. And the bill would require the creation of a high roads utility career program at the California Workforce Development Board. It would be designed to connect prospective employees through statewide and regional programs, pre-apprenticeship type programs, with prospective employers in the utility sector, both in water, wastewater, electric, and telecommunications. Upon appropriations, the bill could enhance some existing programs, and it's modeled after Bay Works. So the California Municipal Utilities Association is the sponsor, and when they put together the bill, they looked at the Bay Works program as a model and crafted it after that. So in theory, Bay Works could benefit if there were an appropriation to expand some of its programs, as would the district. There's also, upon appropriation, requirement that the Department of Education partner with the trade associations to do outreach to 9th through 12th graders in high school about career opportunities and career requirements in the utility sector. So the recommendation for the board is to support AB 735.
Just a question. So would this come under the High Road Training Partnerships program at the Workforce Development Board?
Yes, and as you know, that has several programs under it. It's not really a one-size-fits-all. It can be tailored.
Director Coleman?
Quick question, Bay Works.
Do we utilize that? I know other water agencies utilize Bayworks as a means of finding future employees.
Yes, it's my understanding these are pre-apprenticeship programs, and we do partner with Bayworks.
Okay. I think it's a great bill. I'll move it.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries, and that was to accept the staff recommendation to support the bill.
All right, thank you. So the second bill before you is AB 1423. This is by Assemblymember Shivo, a new member. She's from the San Fernando Valley. This is another PFAS pollution prevention bill. The bill bans the manufacture and sale of artificial turf that contains regulated PFAS. It has, and that would be by January 1, 2025. It has interim measures. So by January 1, 2024, a manufacturer would have to notify a public agency, so sort of at a city or county level, an elementary school, high school, and higher education entity that their product, artificial turf, contains regulated PFAS, and then those entities would be prohibited from installing that unless they were grandfathered in. So if they had put together and completed their design and permitting for a project that was going to install PFAS that contained, install artificial turf that contained regulated PFAS, they would be grandfathered in. So it takes an effect starting January 1, 2024. So staff recommendation on this one is to support the bill. It would not have a cost to the district. It would provide a benefit in terms of improving water quality in the bay because obviously stormwater runoff interacts with artificial turf and that's a problem for water quality. So consistent with our previous bills, we're recommending a support.
Director Young?
Yeah, I mean, you may not know the answer to this, so maybe there's somebody that does. Does artificial turf that gets installed in people's homes contain regulated PFAS? Do we know?
I don't know the answer. I do know that it's prohibited. We don't use it or allow it for our rebate programs.
No, I know that. We've acted on that
Yeah,
affirmatively.
but I don't know. I presume that it may. If it's in the market, I would imagine it's some of the same manufacturers, but I can't answer that.
So I would just put a pin in the idea that we may want to
expand
something
this.
that prohibits the use in residential.
Yeah, that's something we can bring up with the author's office as well. I think potentially if we're trying to, if the goal of this bill is to ban its manufacture and sale, it might result similarly in the products themselves banning it.
Although I wish our goal was just banning PFAS, period.
And we're having to do this incrementally.
Director Coleman?
Yeah, I brought this up so the other board members who are not on the committee can know what I say. I'm in support of the bill. I think it's the right kind of bill to support. What I want to make sure is that we're not going to have a potentially negative impact when you're asking people when the mixed drought comes along to conserve water, take out your turf, and one of the options might be the kind of turf that's being talked about in this bill, and as well as schools and parks and things like that. So as you're tracking it, Kathy, I think we need to have something in there, if needed, as an escape valve, if that's the right way to look at it, so we don't end up having a negative impact potentially where people could say, oh, well, our day of AstroTurf, it's past its prime, we're going to go back to green grass. And then that may have a negative impact on our water conservation efforts. Just, we need to, I think, look at that and be cognizant of it. That could be one of the impacts.
I cannot stand behind that. So this is forwarding that as something that the board is stating. We'd have to have a discussion.
I'm not saying it's,
policy discussion
I'm
about
not
it.
saying stating it. I'm just raising what my concerns were in the Ledge HR committee. I just don't want to put us in a position potentially down the road. Hopefully they'll come up with other materials that do not contain PFAS.
Well, we already decided we're not giving people rebates for AstroTurf.
Right, but there are people I've noticed in their yards who've removed lawns and put AstroTurf in.
Yeah, and we should try to make sure that those lawns that they're putting in don't have PFAS in them.
Marguerite, we did not vote on that.
Okay.
I was just raising my issues.
Yeah, it's I mean, the possibility of PFAS leaking through our city's NPDES, regulated, storm drains into the bay is a concern that I share with Director Young. That, this bill itself looks to be much more narrow than that, but we really do need to have programs that I think I would support programs that would look to phase it out. But it does seem to be beyond the scope of this bill right now, and it's this is the bill that we have to support.
President Katz,
I have a hand for public comment. I need to see if it's on this item.
Yes, so let's take public comment then.
Okay. Kevin Fitzsimmons, your hand is up, and you should be able to unmute your mic. And your hand is down. Okay.
I'll move this item.
second.
It's been moved and seconded. Did the public comment?
I think that was an accidental
Okay.
hand.
All right. Yeah, we would take public comment if it were known before we voted. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries.
All right, thank you. So now I'm going to turn to an information item in your packet. What we're bringing back is an update on a package of water rights bills that I briefed you on in March at the March board meeting. These three bills, as you know, and I had reported back then, the sponsors and the authors are stating that the legislature and the state of California needs to update how it manages its water system. And they really focus in on three areas. One of the bill gives the board new interim relief authority to enforce water rights diversions and use. The second one clarifies the board's authority to curtail pre-1914 water right holders and allows the board to curtail in any water year type. And the third one verifies or gives the board the ability to verify existing claims to water and diversions to ensure that they are legal. So the proponents of these bills and the authors are arguing that given what we've experienced with climate change and these swings in precipitation and the impact on our water resources, the board needs these new tools to act more nimbly. On the other side, there is opposition, and you've seen in your packet the list of opposition are the trade associations, the water agencies, you see the chambers and some other private industry groups, as well as agriculture. They have been a straight oppose on these bills. All three bills actually got out of their policy committee hearings, and they were amended. But they weren't amended sufficient to address the issues of the opposition coalition. As you know, the district, we do not have a position on these bills currently. We have been working with the author's office on two, on AB 460 by Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, the interim relief bill, and AB 1337 by Assemblymember Wicks, which deals with curtailments. The other thing, and sort of in the background to be aware of, is the administration. The governor's office has not weighed in on these bills. These bills are still in their House of Origin. They will be heard in appropriations, the two I mentioned. The Senate bill, SB 389 by Senator Allen, that deals with validate or verification of a water right, that bill was heard in appropriations and is on suspense. And I suspect the other two, AB 460 and AB 1337, will also go on suspense. Once they come off, and the deadline for that is May 19th, and they will go to the floor, and we have until June 2nd before they have to pass out of their House of Origin. So there is still a lot of time in the House of Origin for there to be amendments to the bills, and there are lots of discussions ongoing. Just to highlight for you very quickly, we still have concerns with the interim relief bill, AB 460. They really focus in on two areas. The first one is sort of the broad scope of interim relief, which would allow the board to issue an interim relief order, which is like a temporary restraining order or an injunctive relief order. Basically, It allows the board to issue those orders for enforcing waste and unreasonable use, the public trust doctrine, in addition to, a curtailment order or water right or license or certificate. Also to address water quality objectives as well as protections for fisheries downstream of a dam. That is a pretty broad scope, and we're concerned about that because we think that interim relief should really be used if it's an enforcement tool to address enforcement of an existing order or regulation or water right certificate. So if there were a legal diversion, for example. The bill also still lacks what we think is sufficient due process. So what the bill would do, it has been amended, so they could issue interim relief and they could they're required to offer a hearing with 10 days notice. Previously, it was 20 days notice, but 10 days notice is not a lot of time if you're having sort of this broad scope to actually prepare a case to go before the board. And then they could also do it on an immediate basis if they felt like there was sort of irreparable harm that could be done to another legal diverter or to the water resources. So for example, in-stream flows or a fishery, for example. So in that case, when they do an immediate relief order, that could be in place for 180 days. So our water diversions or our water use rights could actually be enjoined, and then we could be incurring violations. Now, would that occur? I doubt it, but that's theoretically a possibility. So making sure those due process provisions are in place, and what we're trying to do is make a distinction between something that is really short-term and an enforcement tool versus something that creates sort of a long-term restriction on the use of our legal water right. And then the third thing that the bill does is it does require, before a final decision is made, that we maybe have to pay for studies or environmental documentation or any studies that the water board deems are necessary to inform a decision about that particular diversion or use of water. So we have sent a letter to the author's office and requested a meeting. We're trying to get that scheduled now so we can sit down and see if we can find a way to address our concerns. The other bill, AB 1337, by Assemblymember Wicks, that bill was substantially amended. And now it's really focused in on what I had mentioned was clarifying that the Water Board has the authority to curtail pre-1914 water rights, but also allowing the Water Board to curtail in any water year type. So they could curtail, regardless of the water year type, but depending on sort of what is the water right and availability of water at that time. So there again is a concern about being able to curtail in any water year type. We think it should be tied back to a critically dry year or a sequence of critically dry years, which is currently in statute, or an emergency order. And secondly, the bill now requires as well that the board can or may issue regulations to oversee curtailments. And we actually think they should be required to develop curtailments. The previous curtailments that they have done, we have worked through that process, and we think there's improvements that can be made. And if they had a regulation that sort of governs statewide how they do curtailment orders, we think that would be beneficial. So that's another area where we're focusing in on. So that's sort of high level, some of the remaining issues that we have with these bills. The other bill, the Senate bill by Senator Allen, we do not have concerns with that bill. That bill is moving forward. It just gives the board the authority to require water right holders to provide information to the board on the nature of their right, when they have diverted, their historic use, and so on. And they can do informational orders. And again, the board can adopt regulations to oversee those provisions of that statute. So that is an update right now. I just wanted to keep you all informed. Our strategy is to continue to work to address our issues. And if we can't make progress, then we may need to bring these back to the board for a position so that we can weigh in the second house when it gets over, at least the two assembly bills over to the Senate. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Director Linney?
Thank you for that discussion about these bills. It's my understanding in the big picture, these bills seek to remedy some of the problems we have with water rights in this state. We're still dealing with water rights and decisions that were made over 100 years ago. We've got a new environment. We've got a new, the ways we use the water. The legislation, in my understanding, is seeking to help the State Water Resources Control Board adjudicate these water rights in a way that modernizes them in some way. And I also understand our perspective, you know, that we need to look after our interests and our customers' interests first. But can you give some perspective on overall what the positive things that these bills might do, or how they might affect or help solve some of the other problems with water rights statewide, and how that might actually, I mean, are there any ways that they would benefit us as well, as apart from the fact that we need to, you know, watch out for how they apply to us?
Yes, so I think you're correct. I mean, this is in sort of under this umbrella of water rights modernization, and this has been a conversation that's been going on now for a couple of years. And various, you know, groups have weighed in on this policy issue. I think on AB 460, the interim relief bill, we have not been taking a position on this, but we have been speaking with the author's staff and trying to sort of find ways where the bill could be narrowed. The board has the authority right now, if there is an illegal diversion or a violation of a curtailment order, and they've cited an example up on the Shasta River this past summer, where there was a flagrant violation. The Shasta River water users were under a curtailment order and said that they, despite the order, they were going to continue to divert, and they did so for 8 days, and they really lowered the water levels in that stream and caused harm to the fishery. The board could have gone to the Attorney General's office and obtained a temporary restraining order. They didn't choose to do that. We don't know the reasons why they didn't choose to do that. And what they are saying now is the interim relief order would allow them to act more quickly rather than having to go through the AG's office. Now, one could hypothesize it's not as simple as going through the AG's office to get a TRO from the court. So there may be ways to actually give the board some new powers to allow them to actually go and stop an illegal diversion like that, whether that's interim relief but very narrowly defined, or give the board, you know, TRO powers to go to the courts. There's a lot of discussion around that that's happening at the moment. The other issue is the bills actually increase the penalties. And they create two types of penalties. They create administrative penalties that the board can apply, so it's $1,500 per day for a violation, or they could do civil penalties through the AG, which are up to $10,000 per violation per day and $2,500 per acre feet. Those are much higher than what's currently in statute, and hopefully would deter this kind of behavior, because in the case of the Shasta water users, for the 8 days they diverted, they only paid $4,000 in penalties. And that was kind of, in their mind, the cost of doing business. So these higher penalties may be a good thing and be a deterrent. On the curtailment bill on 1337, it is not our issue, even though, you know, we do own pre-1940 water rights. That issue is a separate issue that's being addressed by the proponents and the authors. What our issue is really around, and where we see potential for some benefit, could be if they decided to adopt regulations that could make a determination for curtailment orders, so how they do them statewide. There may be some benefit to that. There have been discussions about that as a potential option, but that has not moved forward. But that is something that I think maybe the author's office could consider. So it brings sort of a more rational and a daylights how they do curtailment orders, and improves the methodology that they're using. They're using a water unavailability methodology that stands to be improved, and our staff have been providing input on that as they've gone through the previous curtailment orders by the board. So there are some opportunities there. And then, like I said, on the third bill, the informational orders to collect information on the actual, to verify the actual water right and use. We see that as helpful to the board in advancing their bills. And then, of course, one thing I don't think I mentioned is, and I may have, is that the governor, while he has not weighed in on these bills this year, he did last year say that this was an issue that deserves consideration, and his staff put forward a budget proposal for, I believe it's $31 billion, to upgrade and improve the State Water Board's water rights system. And we think there too is an opportunity for additional funding that could help the board with digitizing the water rights information, which would help with administration.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that perspective.
Director Patterson? Okay, thought I saw your hand. Director Coleman?
Quick question. You know, you briefed us on the Ledge Committee. Did you say 31 billion?
I meant to say 31 million. I'm sorry if I said billion.
So it's a lot of money
That
that we
is a
don't
lot of money.
have.
That could fill the budget deficit, so my
Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah, I appreciate the report and getting an update. You know, I think it's important for us to stay up to date about our concerns with the bill as you're presenting them to the members and to the policy committee staff, because the two bills that we do have concerns with are both written by delegation members. The sponsor is a leading environmental group, and we like to have good relationships with these entities. Not just because of our close relationships with them, but because we have shared values for the most part. But at the same time, the concerns that you're bringing are legitimate issues, and we do expect them to be addressed and worked through. So I hope that we'll be able to have some movement. But we in the past have been cautious taking opposed positions on legislation that is sponsored by a leading environmental group or carried by a delegation member. So going through this process helps us understand that we've exhausted all of the avenues to resolve these issues.
If you recall, Andy, when we met with Assemblymember Wicks, I guess it is, she said she would understand if we were to oppose it and it was not an issue. But that, I mean, so she understood the position we're in vis-a-vis the position she is promoting.
That is correct. She did say that. And then she also at the same time asked, she hopes that we would continue to collaborate with her office
As we should.
to be sort of a sounding board for ideas and solutions to her bill, which is what we have been doing to date.
As we should.
Yeah, and I think that we're following the right protocol, and we may need to oppose the bill if you know when we take a look at the issues that are narrowed down in the Senate.
I guess I'd raise a question of whether we need to oppose a bill or not. I mean, it seems like there's plenty of people opposing it already, whether adding us actually, if it comes down to that, versus just, you know, staying out, because we have a perfectly legitimate reason to stay out as well. I don't, you know, maybe we don't need to. We're getting an opening to have conversations and move the bill in a direction that will make it better to swallow if it does get passed, and you know, maybe that's enough.
Yeah, Director Young, that states my view more accurately. I think I'm keeping an open mind to see what issues are still remaining when we get to that point. Director Coleman?
I agree. I think we should keep an open mind and approach on this and work with the two assembly members on this, Wicks and Barakan. But we should also keep in mind if there's a bill that could have a negative impact on us, we have a responsibility for our constituents in long term to take a position, I believe. Yes, there are a lot of water agencies who are opposing it, including some of our partners, I suspect, up in the upcountry, as well as eventually perhaps local water agencies as well that are part of BAYWAC and everything else that we're involved with here in the Bay Area. I'm not advocating that we should oppose it. Let's see where it goes, and let's see if we can get enough amendments where it's palatable for us.
Yeah, my recommendation right now would be, and this is an interesting year because we're at the start of a 2-year session. We have 1/3 of the legislature is new. We have a lot of bills that have been moving through policy committee, and it's a large number that have been moving through. So a lot of times, some of these really difficult issues, there isn't sufficient time set with the calendar to address the issues. And new members obviously look to leadership and follow leadership's guidance on how they vote. So bills are moving through. Now, these bills did have no votes on them and also had no votes recorded, and some of those were by Democrats who had heard from their water agencies who had expressed concerns, and they had raised issues in the committee. My sense is that there's still room to work on amendments. If it gets to the second house and we get to a place where we're not seeing our concerns addressed and the coalition still maintain a straight opposed position, there may be some value in looking at an oppose unless amended position, because that gives us then some leverage to consider, you know, how to negotiate with them where we could move neutral. But I don't want to do that and create any surprises with these authors, and that's why I'm trying to go through this process right now. So I want to do it out of respect to the authors because they're part of our delegation and this board and where you want to be, but we'll continue to have those conversations with them, and then at the appropriate time, if I see there's a need to bring back a position like that, I would do so.
It also suggests to me that not for this session, but, for a second year bill or next session, is that both authors are carrying important bills on water. And we haven't had that in our delegation as much, right? So, or we
correct.
did, we had the quirk bill last time, but anyway, it's just to really think about what can we do with them that advances our more, sort of progressive, enlightened view around some of these things that might not be in alignment with all the folks that are on the opposed side of this, that would be able to bring them in potentially.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on Assembly Bill or on the water rights modernization legislation? Seeing no further comments and not seeing any public comment, we will, any other updates on legislative issues?
The only other updates on legislative issues relate to the budget. So the governor's office just put out a press release just this morning. They plan to release the revised budget, the revised revenue projections called the May Revise, this Friday. So we will look at that. The Department of Finance came out in March with their latest numbers in terms of revenues, and it's about $4 billion below what the governor was projecting. So at that time, back in March, he was projecting a $22.5 billion deficit. So we're likely to see sort of a worse fiscal outlook in this May Revise, which may result in cuts. The governor tried to avoid that, or even using some of the rainy day funds. So we'll just keep monitoring that, and we'll bring that back to you with an update. And then on the federal level, the House and Senate lawmakers basically announced that the Committee on Appropriations, they're going to start their fiscal year 2024 markup schedules. And so the House will start on the 15th of this month, and the Senate yet hasn't put out a specific date. That will start at the subcommittee level, and that's all going to be sort of under the cloud of the debates that are going on right now about the debt ceiling and the House Republican bill and sort of how they move forward. But we're just continuing to monitor those as well.
Dr. Coleman?
Quick question, and maybe you don't have the answer for this, Kathy. Assuming that Congress does not get its act together and the debt ceiling is not resolved, what is that going to mean for EBMUD? What is it going to mean for the federal monies that we're supposed to receive from grants and applications or approved grants and so on? Do we know?
I'm not going to speculate on that. I think I would turn to our Director of Finance, what it means in terms of implications.
Yeah, but I would say, I mean, right now, I think if you look at what Janet Yellen was talking about, I mean, they're going to decide what checks they can write and what checks they can't write. And,
Yeah.
And so I think that's up in the air right now, what's going to actually happen.
And I suspect it's going to be defense and Social Security issues that are going to be kept written.
And that will start playing out, this month and early June when we start seeing what the impact will be and where the discussions are going.
Well, maybe Kathy, working with Sophie and Eric Saperstein in DC, can maybe just do a general outline of potential impacts, assuming the worst case scenario, which hopefully won't happen.
I think many people are weighing in with regards to the potential impacts, but we can share that information with Eric. We will see him this week at Aqua Conference.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. So next, at the last board meeting, we had the first reading to update the EBMUD retirement system actuarially assumed rate of return from 7% to 6.75%. Today, Lisa Serrani, our Manager of Employee Services, will provide the second reading, and the action today is for the board to consider amending the ordinance. Lisa.
Okay. Thank you, General Manager Chan, for that introduction, and President Katz and members of the board. As General Manager Chan mentioned, the Retirement Board has made a change to the assumed rate of return for the EBMUD Employees Retirement System, and this requires an update to our Retirement Ordinance, which is the governing document for our retirement system. So as also he said, today's the second reading, so I'm just going to walk you again through the reason for this ordinance amendment and request today later your vote after I finish the presentation. So our district actuaries, which are Siegel Group, recommended the change from 7% to 6.75% at a November 22nd retirement board meeting. The retirement board then adopted that change along with a few other actuarial assumptions at the January 2023 retirement board meeting. So because the assumed rate of return is used in a calculation of a member's optional benefits, and optional benefits are, for example, when a member elects to leave a benefit for a beneficiary. So because the actuarial rate of return is used for that optional benefit, the IRS actually requires that we clearly state that information in our retirement ordinance. So the amendment that's outlined in the resolution that's attached to the BD1 with this item today to update section 21 of the ordinance will comply with these IRS regulations. Today, we request a vote of the Board of Directors to approve this amendment to the retirement ordinance. And if the board so approves, a few additional steps will be taken, including posting this information in a newspaper for 2 successive weeks, and then a wait for the adoption date. And it could take effect of July 1st, 2023. So that's what I have for the reading.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much.
So next, we'll talk about the budget and rates. As the board's aware, this past January and March, we conducted 2 budget workshops for our fiscal years 2024 and 2025 budget and rates. Based on feedback from the board, we updated our budget and last month mailed out our Proposition 218 notice to our customers. Since the beginning of March, staff and the board have presented our budget and rates to 14 community groups, as well as to the Alameda and Contra Costa County Mayor's Conferences. We have a few more groups we plan to present to this month. Today, we'll present our report on the rates and charges. As we've shared with you, these increases are necessary to address our many challenges, including upgrading and maintaining our aging infrastructure, addressing the impacts of climate change, and protecting the environment and the San Francisco Bay. We also understand that there are many customers who continue to struggle with paying their bills. And at the February Customer Assistance Program workshop, we shared with you our plans to enhance our already industry-leading assistance program to support those most in need. So today we have Sophia Skoda, our Director of Finance, to present the report.
Good afternoon, board members. We have our general manager's report as our general manager just noted. So we're just going to briefly cover the budget and rates calendar. We're going to cover our Proposition 218 rates and charges that are currently out to the public, and then go briefly over our other fees, charges, and regulations. So as the calendar goes, we held our first budget workshop on January the 24th, the second on March the 28th. The Proposition 218 notices have been mailed out to the public. Hopefully you all received them at your homes. And the meeting where the board will consider those rates is on June the 13th coming up. And at today's meeting, we are presenting to you the general manager report, which contains both the Prop 218 and non-218 rates. If the board on June 13th did approve the 218 and non-218 rates, those would all go into effect on July the 1st. So now we'll cover the 218 fees. So again, the 218 fees are those that are governed by the California Constitution. Essentially, the 24 and 25 rates are based on the proposed budget, and that proposed budget has increased over the prior budget. And so the FY24 8.5% and FY25 8.5% rate increases for both water and wastewater are what is proposed. So again, 8.5% for both water and wastewater in each of the 2 fiscal years. We'll go over what those rate impacts are. But in kind of quick summary, for the average single-family residential customer, it's approximately 20 cents a day in each year on the water side, and 7 cents and I think 9 cents on the wastewater side. So the proposed rates must, of course, follow our most recent cost of service studies. We're getting close to the end of our 10-year period on the water side, and so we're about a year out from starting a new water cost of service study, and the wastewater one has been done more recently. These are all consistent with board policies as well. And do want to note that Schedule L, which does contain our drought rate surcharges, is contained as part of what we're proposing that the board consider, and that would be, again, adopted as part of the same rates and charges so that those drought surcharges are available in the event of a drought. We did have one question from the public during the last few weeks after the 218 notice went out, asking, why is it that the drought rate that just went off is 8% and the budget is 8.5%? There's no correlation that up to 8% is depending on the actual drought budget, which is very close to what the drought budget was during this last year, and there's no correlation with the 8.5%. So this shows kind of a summary of proposed and projected rates. I do want to note in response to a comment that's been made by the board before about projections being wrong, that it's tough to make projections given the number of changes over time. So, for example, we heard recently when we had the second part of the water supply workshop that the state is going to be looking to drive down single-family residential indoor water use from about 50 gallons per day down to about 40 gallons per day, and so that fairly dramatic drop is not, for example, reflected in these rate projections. So those are the kinds of things that are not necessarily seen here. So again, the 8.5% in each of the 2 years for both water and wastewater shown on this slide. In terms of what those impacts actually look like, we're showing here an average water user with 8 CCF per month. I do want to note for the public that while our average single-family residential use is 8 CCF, our median user is 6 CCF. So that means more than 50% of our customers actually use less than the 8 CCF per month, and the average is drawn up by larger water users. So if you look at our current bill on the water side, just under $70 for, again, the average, not the median use, so more than 50% of our customers pay less than this on single-family residential. The proposed rate goes up to just under $75, that change representing the 8.5%. After the second year's increase goes into effect, we're just over $80. And again, that reflects the second 8.5%. On the wastewater side, and again, this is only for wastewater treatment charges, the cities and districts that provide collection have a separate charge that are sometimes on the property tax bill, sometimes collected by EBMUD on their behalf. And then lastly, EBMUD does have a wet weather facilities charge that does appear on homeowners and business owners' property tax bills. But the wastewater treatment bill, about $25 a month currently, going up to $27 roughly in FY24 and $29.25 in FY25. So again, this is for a 6 CCF per month user. As you might imagine, not all water use is coming to us. Some of it is, of course, outdoor water use. And so that's, again, that difference between the 8 and the 6. We also have a maximum amount of water that we charge for because there's just, only so much laundry and so many showers that we would expect customers to be taking. So if we look at the sort of overall rate impact, this was a suggestion that was made to us some years ago, and we've now been including this in all of our Proposition 218 notice work and in our presentations to the public. This is a chart that shows the 25th, 50th, 75th, and 95th, and then the average. And so again, this shows the 50th percentile versus the average, so the 6 versus the 8 that I mentioned earlier. And it shows the range of bills for both FY24 and FY25. On the wastewater side, this shows the average single-family residential with 6 CCF and then the maximum at 9 CCF and the impacts there. On the non-residential wastewater treatment side, the unit rates here have been increased to reflect the budget increases. And so this is just a sample of the BCC codes, the businesses that we charge, restaurants, hotels, hospitals, and retail office. And again, these are reflective of their varying strengths. So when we think about wastewater, you think about a glass of water and there's, a teaspoon or something of sand and a teaspoon of sugar, and you stir it all up. We're trying to remove that sand and that sugar in effect. And so those are reflected as the strengths of that wastewater, and these are the rates for us to remove those compounds. On the wet weather facilities charge, and again, this is the charge that which funds our operation of the facilities, for example, at Point Isabel, at Oakport, and at our main wastewater treatment plant. During rainy season, which we've just experienced, we receive up to 10 times as much flow at the plant as we would receive on an average summer day. And so we activate our wet weather treatment facilities. And again, these are the funds to pay for those operations. A small lot currently paying about $125 would go up to just under $136, and then up to $147.50, just under that. We've got the medium lot and then the large lot. Most single-family residential lots in our service area, because our service area is on the west side of the hills, tend to be smaller and fall in the small lot category. So when we put it all together and we look at our average water bill for, again, that 8 CCF customer, we find ourselves roughly the middle of the pack for this particular set of agencies against which we are comparing ourselves. It's difficult to do an apples to apples. If we were to change this and use a 6 CCF, or we, for example, have asked these agencies to report to us what their particular average use is. And for the agencies that did report back, I think we ended up moving up slightly. San Francisco fell because, again, their average use is 4.8 or something like that, so a little bit just under 5, and ours is closer to 6. Again, even smaller lots in San Francisco than we have in our service area, and also even cooler weather. When we look at our wastewater bills as compared with others, we have to distinguish the fact that we provide only the wastewater treatment, and so you see EBMUD's portion there as compared with the full average charge that a customer would pay at EBMUD. So this is kind of an amalgamation of Oakland and Berkeley and all of Piedmont, all of the other agencies that are collecting wastewater, and we are only representing the treatment portion. But when you put that all together, it appears to be high. We still are meeting our own KPI for where we want to fall just on the treatment portion. Now we're going to look briefly at our non-Proposition 218 rates, capacity fees, and other charges. When we look at our water system capacity fees, the SCC schedule has been updated, looking at our calculation methodologies from the 2021 most recent SCC study. We update our facility costs for inflation using the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, and we also depreciate facilities, et cetera, and add in new facilities. And so the FY24 SCC does increase the ranges from just shy of 8% to up to 8.6%. On the wastewater capacity fee side, the WCF, we updated again the calculation and methodology. There's a typo there. It says SCC schedule. It should say WCF. My apologies. And again, those facility costs have been increased for inflation and depreciation again in the same way. And those increases range from just under 7% to 7.5% over the FY23 rates. And again, those would go into effect on July 1. With regards to other proposed updates to rates, fees, and charges, we have a whole series of fees that have been updated based on cost recovery, changes in labor costs, changes in material costs, etc. And we also have water fees and charges that have been updated, including charges for account establishment, real property use application fees, Public Records Act fees, etc. These have been updated to reflect actual district costs, and they range from 0 to 10%. Installation charges have also been updated for service meters, private fire, etc., and again updated to reflect district's actual costs, ranging from 8 to 17%. All the details are in the actual report and recommendations. With regards to regulations that govern our water service, we do have some changes in Section 1, which provides an explanation of terms to clarify single-family and residential and multi-use and how they're designated, effectively just updating them to reflect changes in California zoning law. So when we look at this last series of 2 slides here, updates to wastewater, increases in permit monitoring and violation fees, increased testing fees, again, all these to reflect our district costs, and increase in our PSL compliance fees, again, to reflect district costs. Lastly, on our resource recovery rates, there's an increase in the per gallon charges to provide an up to rate of the increase in 1 to 2 cents per gallon over the FY23 rates to reflect our costs. The wastewater interceptor connection review inspection, those fees are increasing roughly 2%, again, reflecting district costs. And so to that end, we recommend that the board take 2 actions. So 1, we are filing that the report be filed and that the public hearing date be set as noticed in the 218 notice. I'm happy to take any questions.
One small question. Is there a reason that we put the out years rate projections?
People like to see them. We're happy not to put them in.
Just worth considering.
Hard to predict the future. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just, it's like putting something in that we then have to change. Anybody that's
This is
makes people feel better, but maybe it's not better. That's all.
Yeah, this is the beginning of a 2-year budget cycle, so there may be a time when we could have that discussion at length before our next budget cycle. But they're already in today's slideshow, and we've already described from staff and board how we can't predict the future. These are our best estimates, given that we know the need for infrastructure is increasing. That these projections used to be lower with an unrealistic rosy picture about our infrastructure needs, and I'm glad to see them moving in a more realistic direction because but it does raise an appropriate question about whether unless we're really basing that information on an actual budget, whether those numbers are really useful. But we have a budget proposal that we've been reviewing. We have rates and charges that budget proposal is dependent on. So the recommended action is to file the general manager's report and to set the public hearing. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
Moved by Director Linney, seconded by Director Patterson. Any further comment from the board? Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The motion carries.
Thank you, Sophia. For our final presentation, we have Janella Sambor-Wallace, our Manager of Diversity and Inclusion, and Kay Tate, our Senior Human Resources Analyst. I'll provide our reporting year 2022 Equal Employment Opportunity Program report. We did not have time today at the Legislative HR Committee meeting this morning to present the report. Janella.
Okay.
Click one time.
One time.
Yeah, in the presentation, and then you should be able to.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Good afternoon, directors. My name is Janella Sambor-Wallace, Manager of Diversity and Inclusion. And this is Catherine K. Tate, Senior HR Analyst in the Diversity and Inclusion Office. This presentation will provide an overview of the district's reporting year 2022 Equal Employment Opportunity Program, or EEOP report, which is developed and presented to the board annually in compliance with the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Program, or OFCCP regulations. Reporting year 2022 is defined as July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Reporting year 2023 is defined as July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Data from this reporting year 2022 report highlights the following. First, a snapshot of the district's reporting year 2022 workforce placement goals
progress, and areas for improvement. Next, the ongoing action items or action-oriented program, or AOP, efforts for diverse representative workforce through the end of reporting year 2023. This compliance report is just one element of our diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI strategy. The EEOP report is considered a complementary resource to the district's DEI strategic plan, or DEISP, which can be referred to for additional information on our progress regarding action items and AOPs that go beyond our compliance requirements. This EEOP report was compiled in collaboration with Biddle Consulting, and Heather Sakamoto, the EEOAA consultant 2 at Biddle, is available on phone to answer any technical questions on data analysis and demographics, and to provide Biddle's perspective on industry trends. I will now hand this over to Kay to present on the next few slides.
The EEOP report was designed to bring females, members of minority groups, individuals with disabilities or IWDs, and protected veterans into all levels and segments of the district's workforce in proportion to their available representation in the labor market. The EEOP report is a detailed, results-oriented recruitment tool for the district, which when implemented results in full compliance with OFCCP requirements through full utilization and equal treatment of all. Females and minority placement goals are based on availability in the relevant labor market. For individuals with disabilities, the district adopted the nationwide aspirational utilization goal of 7%, and for protected veterans, the district used the OFCCP's five criteria methodology, which resulted in a 3% individualized hiring benchmark. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of the methodology established by the OFCCP for conducting a utilization analysis. For reporting year 2022, and as with previous EEOP reports, the district conducted a workforce analysis, which is an analysis of the district's over 200 job classifications grouped by similarities on job responsibilities, qualifications, salary range, and other factors. Based on this, the district has established 22 job groups. The next analysis is referred to as the availability analysis. For reporting year 2022, Biddle used information from the most recently published Census EEO tables to identify potential qualified applicants by race and sex based on the defined labor areas, labor markets, and occupational titles for each of the job groups identified. The final step is the utilization analysis, which is a comparison of the information resulting from the workforce analysis with the information derived from the availability analysis. Whenever it is found that minority or female representation within a job group is less than would be reasonably expected given their availability, the district establishes a percentage placement goal. These goals take into account the weighted availability of qualified persons within the organization, which is the internal availability, and within the relevant labor areas, external availability. As a result, out of 22 job groups, the district established 2 placement goals for females and 7 placement goals for minorities in reporting year 22. Next slide, please. This slide provides a general overview of how availability, specifically external availability, is determined. Actually, this is the next slide. Can you go back one? Okay. From the overall population in the recruitment area, which is the largest or orange circle, we determine in the middle or gray circle who is in the workforce or qualified and available to work. From that group, we then analyze who is working in these specific job occupations, which is the innermost or yellow circle. This is the availability. The availability determines the approximate level at which each racial and gender group could reasonably be expected to be represented in a job group if the district's employment decisions are being made without regard to gender, race, or ethnic origin. Next slide, please. These charts show the populations of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. Between 2010 and 2021 census, we have the following insights on local demographics. The race ethnicity groups which showed the most population growth are Asians, which increased by approximately 6 percentage points, and Hispanic Latino, which increased by 1 percentage point. The race ethnic groups which showed a decrease in population are whites, which showed a decline of approximately 6 percentage points, and African Americans or blacks, which declined by approximately 1.7 percentage points. I don't know if Heather is on the call, but she can provide insight. Yes, yes.
Is the census data, is it based on the county entirety or the EBMUD service area in both counties?
This is overall population on each county, both counties
Thank you.
combined.
Yes, and I would like to add a couple of points as I have visibility being a consultant that manages a good number actually of public agencies, utility companies, water districts, et cetera. I have the ability to see the gender and race representation across all of these agencies for comparison purposes. And obviously, without sharing too much information, I would like to highlight the fact that East Bay MUD has done a very good job, specifically in the minority categories, as it compares to other agencies in California, comparable in size. On average, East Bay MUD is around 8 to 10% more diverse in the minority categories than other agencies. In the female population, they're about average with everyone else, but I wanted to highlight the minority groups.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, this slide shows a reporting year 2022 7 job groups with 7 placement goals for minorities. Note that placement goals are not rigid, inflexible quotas which must be met. Rather, placement goals are targets that are reasonably attainable by means of applying good faith efforts. The green shows where we exceeded our placement goals. The yellow shows where we almost met our placement goals. For the electrical structural maintenance job group, the district's placement rate was 50%, which was close to the placement goal of 52.7%. The red shows the job groups where we did not meet our goals. And overall, the district made goal-achieving hires in 4 out of the 7 job groups where we previously had underutilization. So next slide. This slide shows the district's workforce progress with respect to our female placement goals in reporting year 22. We did not make any goal-achieving female hires for the electrical structural maintenance work group, although we did almost meet our minority placement goals for this job group, as shown in the previous slide. We exceeded our female placement goal in reporting year 22 for mechanical maintenance. In March 2023, the district hosted a Women in Construction Week event. During that event, we heard the voices of females in trades, which highlighted what we see on this slide. In short, our outreach and retention efforts for females at the district must have a targeted focus on women in the trades. To provide support to females at the district, a new affinity group is in the process of forming, the Women's Employee Resource Opportunity and Collaboration Community, or WEROC. As Kay will explain later, approximately 26% of employees at the district identify as female on a binary. A much smaller proportion of those females employees work in the trades. And Kay will now present on the district's progress for individuals with disabilities and protected veterans.
On this slide, we wanted to show the 5-year trend of placement rates for protected veterans and individuals with disabilities. In reporting year 22, the veteran placement rate exceeded the district's individualized hiring benchmark of 3%. The district's placement rate for individuals with disabilities nearly met the federal utilization goal of 7%. This demonstrated a significant improvement from reporting year 21 placement rate for individuals with disabilities. Next slide, please. These charts demonstrate the district's workforce in terms of race and gender for reporting year 22. This is the snapshot date as of June 30th, 2022. It's important to note that people identify in a number of different ways that may not be captured in the categories here, but for the purposes of the EEOP report compliance, these are the categories that the district is required to report to the OFCCP. As was mentioned previously, workforce availability is an estimate of the proportion of individuals who are diverse, available, and qualified for employment for a given job group in the relevant labor market. Based on an analysis of reporting year 22 data, the following placement goals have been established for reporting year 23. Identifying these job groups allow us to refine our EEOP workforce development strategy and targeted outreach. We will speak to the strategies and use to target each of these job groups in reporting year 23, but before that, we will show you the disaggregated placement goals for minorities for reporting year 23. Next slide, please. Although not required for OFCCP compliance, the district disaggregated the placement goals for minorities in reporting year 23 as shown on this slide. As you can see, while we have 7 placement goals for overall minorities, we identified additional placement goals after disaggregating the data. Disaggregated goals show where overrepresentation of one minority group may mask the underrepresentation of another minority group. So for example, the OFCCP compliance, we are at parity for the general clerical job group with regard to overall minorities. However, when the data is disaggregated, an underrepresentation of Hispanic Latino individuals is found. This data informs the reporting year 23 and 24 workforce development strategy, specifically in highlighting the need to improve outreach efforts to Hispanic Latino candidates. Now I'm going to hand over to Janelle to close out the presentation.
Excellent. This slide shows our reporting year 23 and ongoing workforce strategies. Each job group with a minority and/or female placement goal is targeted in at least 3 of these strategies. The first column shows the diversity committee. The committee is comprised of affinity group members, values advocates, club committee members, and representatives from all of these job groups. The diversity committee strategizes on targeted outreach for recruitment and retention of underrepresented groups, which aligns with the DISP Pillar 2, workforce diversity, and Pillar 3, inclusive culture. As we do a review of internal development, we will analyze the best methods to help develop internal pathways to increase opportunities to current employees to qualify for difficult to fill jobs, especially job groups for which we have established goals in the EEOP. We also have internship trainee programs to target almost all of the job groups. Some ones of note include the community trainee program, which restarted in reporting year 22 to target the service maintenance job group, specifically grounds maintenance. The CTP requires a referral from a community-based job training program. This requirement ensures that the program provides opportunities to individuals who are typically underrepresented in these difficult to fill job groups. The trainees also did a rotation in the electrical structural maintenance job group, specifically carpentry. The DIO is currently partnering with facilities maintenance and construction and recruitment and classification to fill these positions this summer. Additionally, as was mentioned earlier with Baywork, the DIO is coordinating and administering a rotational Baywork stackable internship with other wastewater treatment agencies. This internship provides hands-on learning opportunities to 4 diverse, qualified interns in the job groups of electrical structural maintenance and mechanical maintenance. This program, which started in February 2023, is a partnership with Baywork, Jewish Vocational Services, or JVS, and the Peralta Colleges Foundation. Speaking of JBS and Baywork, the district has collaboratives with other external stakeholders and agencies, such as the California Urban Water Association, or CUA, the American Water Works Association, or AWWA, and local pre-apprentice programs such as Cypress Mandela, Richmond Build, Rising Sun, to discuss regional industry recruitment strategies, particularly around the groups in which we currently have internship and trainee programs. The clients of these agencies are predominantly from underrepresented communities that we are trying to target with our EEOP. And as we continue to partner with Cypress Mandela, I wanted to provide an update that the district installed a Baywork EBMUD learning wall at Cypress Mandela, which engages pre-apprentices in exploring water and wastewater careers. And if we go to the second to last column, we also have targeted outreach and community partnerships as a strategy. I will highlight a few. The district partners with organizations serving these communities for referrals, including sending a number of organizations our full list of open recruitments every week. The DIO sets up outreach and information sharing sessions with representatives from diverse community groups throughout our regional recruitment areas. These events, which average about 5 to 7 events a month, include job fairs and career presentations to K-12 schools, post-secondary institutions, and trainee programs like Civicor. We also promote recruitment at local community colleges and universities based in part on the high level of the diversity of their student populations. We are working on building relationships with MESA, Math, Engineering, Science Achievement Programs, which engage educationally disadvantaged students so they can succeed in math and science-based degrees from post-secondary institutions. This helps us recruit diverse qualified interns for STEM-based internship programs, which in turn diversifies our candidate pools for permanent positions. ODEC also recently hired a Community Affairs Representative 1, who is responsible for enhanced workforce development outreach, in addition to supporting the outreach needs of the Contract Equity Office. One of the DIO's intentions is to be more focused and strategic with the enhanced outreach as it relates to the EEOP, specifically targeting females, minorities, protected veterans, and IWDs. instead of simply disseminating information to as many organizations as possible, we want to foster intentional dialogue and connections. And our goal is to focus on community-based organizations that provide case management and test prep, such as Richmond Build and Lao Family. And again, to refer back to the DEISP, we are going above and beyond our placement goal job groups with our targeted outreach. The DEISP is continually assessing the effectiveness of our strategies and looking for improvements. We have pilot projects which identify and address systemic inequities. And as was mentioned earlier today in the DEISP update, staff is in the process of conducting reviews of testing and educational requirements for employment classifications. And you can see in the bottom row, finally, almost all job groups, even without placement goals, are benefited by our workforce strategies. When EBMUD conducts targeted outreach, it is still inclusive in that we are promoting our organization to all applicants who may be interested in all EBMUD jobs, both within and outside of these job groups.
Quick question. Earlier today at the Ledge HR Committee, can you go back to that one slide? The previous slide.
This one.
Thank you. The Affinity Group Diversity Committee. Who are the members of that? And the issue I raised in the Ledge HR Committee meeting this morning was we have a committee that was established to get input from employees and how to go forward. And basically, it's the same people you see making the presentations. It's not hearing from the employees who are the impacted people necessarily. And so how is that different than the Affinity Group Diversity Committee? Who's on it?
I believe you're referring to the Equity Core Team, which
Yes.
is different. This is the affinity groups who, and any employee can join any of the affinity groups.
Okay,
And
great.
then the diversity committee is made up of the leadership of each affinity group, typically the president of the affinity group. We have values advocate representative, the clubs and committee representatives, and 1 to 2 representatives from each of the departments across the district. With the diversity committee, what I did want to mention is that we also did do a foundational DEI training with the diversity committee with a consultant called McLean. So everybody on that diversity committee did get that foundational DEI training.
Okay, so any employee can be participating in this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Linney?
So I find this very interesting, a very thorough presentation and quite encouraging in a lot of ways. It's not surprising that we're rated very highly in this in promoting a very diverse workforce. My question is, is this mostly about creating pathways and encouraging a diverse population to think about these careers that maybe they haven't thought of before or maybe don't have access to because of educational opportunities? Would that be a good way to describe it, sum it up, or?
Yes, I mean, if you think about the public school system, math, all these very, I guess I would say, foundational skill sets, and we're a merit-based organization where we test, right? So yeah, partly it's getting them ready for our testing, getting ready to expand the career opportunities. It's of course there are parents that would like to push for a college degree, but our district classifications, we have trades, operators, very well-paying jobs, very highly skilled jobs that are hard or difficult to fill. And so yes, in essence, we're not just doing a targeted outreach to just fill a person, but we're really going beyond and really doing workforce development, going into the community and expanding their exposure to potential jobs. And that's why we're going, even as early as not even just high school. When asked, we, of course it depends on our time. We're a staff of 3 with 2 interns. But we've been getting, requests from middle schools can you present about wastewater jobs, right? So yeah, it's kind of, we're really doing more than we can.
Ask my 6-year-old nephew, what do you want to be when you grow up? I should suggest wastewater engineer or something like that,
Yeah.
not just policeman or.
And to tie that also just back in with the DISP, we do have that social responsibility, Pillar 5. When we talk about, as Kay mentioned, the benefits of the East Bay MUD, really good paying jobs and really trying to go out early so that people are aware of it and really showing the equitable opportunity, being equitable when we go out to these communities that don't know about these opportunities, particularly as we said that we have the high school internship programs. We're going out to middle schools now to talk about careers. So yeah, just really wanting to, move forward into the DISP, going above even this compliance report.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, you can see how this work and some of the other work ties in place. You heard about the educational requirements. So we've been going through the classifications. For example, the construction and maintenance superintendent, we recently changed in the assistant construction maintenance superintendent, which required for the construction maintenance superintendent 60 units of college. If you didn't have 60 units, you wouldn't get through. And that didn't make a lot of sense because, not that it would be easy to do, but if you look at the engineering position doesn't require a college degree. It just requires that you're a licensed engineer to be an associate. And so does it make sense for us to exclude certain groups of people and how those units requirement ever got in there? So all these pieces are really kind of going beyond of just what's required to do, but what else can we do to create opportunities? Even at the superintendent level, where it also didn't make sense is if you held a superintendent position outside of East Bay MUD, you could apply to East Bay MUD because you were a superintendent. But if you weren't a superintendent at East Bay MUD and did everything the person outside did, you wouldn't be considered. And that's how things were in the past. And we're making these changes and looking at all of our classifications. And so it's a very holistic look at how we do our work. And there's a lot of work to do.
That's great. I have one other question, if I may. So when you're setting the goals where there's underrepresented compared to the surrounding community and the qualifications and everything, I'm just curious about, particularly physical labor jobs that are been traditionally filled by males or men. How do you deal with something like that maybe has some sort of inborn bias that way, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if Heather's still on the phone, but we do look at the availability, and availability means the requisite skills to do the job, and it's based on census data. So it's whatever a person in, doing the census will say what their training was in or whatnot. So in terms of physicality of the job, it's not always necessarily going to represent that. Maybe a female who took the census didn't say, I'm a tradesperson, I'm not there yet. Maybe they're in just, they're in a pre-apprentice. Hopefully they do answer it accurately, but it is based on what the census is saying, but we can only calculate our availability depending on the responses of the census based on available census.
And you're able to measure, again, am I thinking about this wrong though, to think that women in general would not be as interested in those types of jobs, or how is that measured either, by census of whether there's an interest there or?
Yeah, Heather, do you want to answer that? Do you want to take that if you're still
Sure.
there?
Yeah, so I'm here. The census is very limited in the questions that they ask. I don't know if any of you have been a part of that long form. But when the survey goes out, it basically just asks for general information on what position each person in the household holds, basic function, job title, and then pay range. Unfortunately, there's some limitations with that data because the questions are so generic. But overall, the census data does capture fairly accurately, the female representation for those trades position. The female availability is pretty low for the most part in some of the more technical or skilled or trades positions. And so we do refine the overall. So we basically take the overarching census data, we refine it by these 4-digit codes called census codes. And those census codes get pretty granular, and they are basically a descriptor of the requisite skill sets needed to perform a position. And it does get pretty granular. There used to be, I think, 435 different census codes. They did narrow it down to 270 something. But we do refine the information based on those codes, but that is the only thing we can do.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep. I was just thinking that we might go down the road, but we can also
Do that, I'm always last.
until we get back into the boardroom in a month. But I will not seeing a hand raised. I will just go to the hand. So Director Young.
Yeah, it sort of follows on Doug's question in a way. So the census data forms our availability number, which means that it, it basically accepts the systemic bias that exists in the world with regard to what women can do versus what men can do, and what historically white people can do versus people of color. Right. So I mean, I accept that that is the world that we're in, but placing our goals on that versus, I mean, I know we're not going to correct, 80-20 biases overnight just by saying we want to make it 50-50. I get that. But it seems like we could take another step beyond what beyond what the census tells us is possible. Certainly, if we're behind what the census says, then that's a problem. But I think ideally we want to be ahead of. We want to be, pushing that, right? So that's one. And then the second question has to do with the individual with disabilities and the protected veterans numbers. Those are based on what people voluntarily disclose in their employment applications, right? Which I think we know has an inherent, I mean, for veterans, I think it probably is, well, I don't know what the sort of empirical data shows, but I know with disabilities that it underrepresents people, it underreports people with disabilities, because people assume that the information is going to be disclosed and they're going to be, discriminated against, even though the fine print in that very long disclosure statement says nobody that's going to hire you even gets to look at this.
Yes.
Right. But so invisible disabilities as well as, I mean, things go unreported. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So do we do anything to try to tease at those numbers?
May I say, I acknowledge your first comment as well. I just want to say before, you're right, it is status quo, right? Even if we had no placement goals, that's just saying we're meeting status quo. And that's why we do have the DEISP in addition to the EEOP for female minorities. And then for your second question about individuals with disabilities and protected veterans, we are required to resurvey current employees, because sometimes, as an applicant, you might not want to disclose it, but as an employee, maybe you might change your mind and want to actually self-identify as individual with disabilities. So that we are going to do that, I believe, this year, if not early next year. So we do encourage that, and we put all the disclaimers about it's separate, it's confidential. But you're right, the numbers are really based on employees and applicants self-identifying.
Thank you.
I'll shuffle in with a question. First, a comment. I'm really excited to see the slide on slide 16, the disaggregated minority placement goals. It's about time that we look really deeper at the data, but it's challenging because when you start to get into the deeper crosstabs here and the each of the different groups, and trying to assign goals that we would hold ourselves accountable to, it starts to challenge what's realistic, because there's a sense of we want fair representation, we want equal treatment, we want equal access to all of the positions, we want everyone to be able to have the outreach to have that kind of representation and equal opportunity at the district. But there's also, I would imagine, a sense of randomness to who may be up in one year and who may be down in another year. And I'm interested in whether you agree with that dynamic or how you are looking at that. Just because it is important to track this, because if we did see a pattern of multiple classifications leaning towards a problem with one of the disaggregated groups, that would give us very important information to act on. But at the same time, if we're not meeting every single category of every single group every time, we want to make sure that we're celebrating our success and just improving what we're doing that could be doing better. So I'm explaining a few different generalized responses to the data. Of course, at the moment, none of the boxes in this chart are the right outcome. But that does seem a little confusing, because I go back to slide 9 and I see that we are meeting the overall minority goal for service maintenance, supervising engineering, and water distribution, plumbing and maintenance, and up there the heavy equipment truck operators. So I am wondering, if we're meeting those goals, how is it possible that we're not meeting the disaggregated goals over on back to slide 16? So I missed how those coexist.
Actually, if you can go back to the
Which one?
sorry,
The one.
the incumbency. So
This one.
the minority incumbency, this is based on the snapshot date of June 30, 2022. You were asking specifically, President Katz, about heavy equipment truck operators. And yes, while it might look like in the terms of the job groups and who we had at that time, we still had a goal. And that's a placement goal is also a rate of hire. So if we hired 10 truck drivers that year, and if we only hired one, that's a minority, then we would not have met that placement goal. So it's the rate of hire in any given year. Although, again, looking at the incumbency, we might look good. And right now, the OFCCP's requirement is that we do an annual placement goal setting and a reporting every year. So it would be good if we had the luxury of saying, hey, can we have the same placement goals on a 4-year or a 2-year, and we could see our progress. There is a challenge to kind of go, oh, like technicians, we didn't have a job group placement goal this year, but it disappeared from 21. So it'll fluctuate. I'm assuming it'll fluctuate a lot, especially for hard to fill jobs in general. This is the jobs we have placement goals are industry placement goals. It's the trades, service maintenance, electrical, structural, mechanical. Those are hard to fill nationwide. So I guess to answer your question, we may look good in 1 year and a goal might disappear another year, but this is based on snapshot date too. So if in the next few years, a lot of our folks retire and a lot of those folks are minorities or the few females we have, our placement goals may just increase exponentially.
Let me just see if I understand what your response is. So I think what you're saying, and now I'm looking at the slides a little more carefully, and I'm seeing that the slide 9 that's not disaggregated, it has our 21 rate, our 22 rate for the whole not disaggregated, but the slide 16 is for this year, and it's disaggregated.
Yes.
Is this coming year is the first time we've ever disaggregated, and we don't have results yet. We're just so we don't have results yet, or we do have results.
So, President Katz, what I'd like to say is that actually, I think last year we actually did show disaggregation, and typically, actually, the Hispanic Latino column has been has a lot of X's in the red. We've had some with the Asians. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I do know that those two groups, we did have that disaggregation last year in last year's report as well.
Okay.
And I think you probably presented during Ledge HR.
No, I did both.
Oh,
yeah,
both.
but So yes, and I agree with you that it is going to be tough, but we are going to be focusing our workforce development strategy on targeting these groups. But that isn't to say that when I think about inclusive outreach, we're really going to be targeting every job group, but really trying to focus on these two specifically that have these placement goals.
Okay, yeah, I'm still a little confused about if we have the same year, disaggregated versus not disaggregated data for each year. Maybe we could get some clarification about that in a follow-up memo, just to make sure that we get the full data. But what I think is more important to review here is that the approach that we're taking. That we're really going deep into data and looking for where we have not been able, without that full data, to be able to understand is a aggregated minority placement goal, overlooking certain patterns that might be showing up between different groups, and how do we make interventions that really target the group that is not getting fair representation, and then also how do we look at what's happening in different key classifications and seeing if those classifications are really the ones that have either a trend across all of the groups or some of the groups. What I am attentive to is something that I know can happen even in civil service hiring systems, is where you can have a hiring bias for one group or another group that is not characteristic of the agency's values, but just by virtue of a group that's incumbent in a classification, not even necessarily by virtue of a bias of the hiring manager. It's just who's recruiting, their friends. That can be something that occurs, and that can mean that we don't have equal opportunity. So I think being able to look at those numbers to make affirmative efforts to have that equal opportunity is really important. And I'm just sharing those comments about suggestions on how we would use this data and study it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Director Patterson.
We've been about this for some time, and kind of in my analysis, I often talk to my good friend, Director McIntosh. What I've seen in the vista of the district, in our footprint, the changes that have occurred, it was almost 7 or 8 years ago when we saw a change in our workforce, and many of the Hispanic persons in 444 came and talked about the change and the fact that African Americans were missing. Our number, in some respect, in the entry-level jobs is going down. Just in the skilled jobs, we may have gone up. This is not just an East Bay MUD problem. It's a problem for the East Bay. Many people are leaving the area, see? Now, how do you reach the ones that are left? And I think that requires some special review. You're not prepared to answer that today, but that's what we keep looking for on the board, to hear that information coming in. And of course, Derry's working on it. That's our frustration, because we got to find the answer. And the answer is not just left to us alone. Many government agencies in the East Bay are looking for African Americans to be in their workforce and to move them up. I know we have a responsibility to the makeup, and we're not pushing anybody ahead, but we gotta get a handle on that. And maybe as you go forward, these are the questions that we keep looking for answers to. And maybe we have to do something special in that area in order to attract. I remember a time when women in the workplace was a big problem. My good friend Ben Tapscott, the fire department was looking for people. And he taught them how to climb the ladder and do all the stuff that you had to do to pass the basic tests just to be in the makeup. See? Some of those kind of special things may need to happen. And I'm not trying to give you the answer, but we've all got to work hard to find the answer and to put our best thinking caps on as to how to do that. As you heard today, we were talking about the workforce, and we were talking about how the Department of Education is being pushed forward by the state to really crystallize some of what we're talking about. They've been missing from the vista for a long time. High schools, they don't even have trades anymore. See, you have to go to the community college. These are the things that we got to keep pounding on and working on, putting our best thinking capital on, and finding that answer, because all the way up to the federal government, this is a question. And it's a question of larger areas than just ours. So let's see what we can do. I'm challenging you to look into it, to your department. Let's make East EBMUD proud. Let's make our community proud. And let's move forward together. But we're going to need all the help that we can get. And there are some special groups out there, Urban Strategies Council. Some of the ones that deal in this kind of thing need to be brought into your equation. And we'll talk further. I just wanted to raise that question and make sure we're on the same page, because if we walk away from here looking at that report, you see, and we don't have anything in mind as to how we're going to get it moved to the right dimension, then we failed in our job.
Yep.
Okay. Director McIntosh.
I'm frustrated. Thank you for all the work you've done on this, but I've been frustrated from day one when I look at these reports, Equal Employment Opportunity Program. I mean, it's like we're trying to hide the ball. You know, the terminology is not easy to understand for a layperson. The methodology is not easy to understand. It's just disconcerting. The trend is disconcerting. I wish these reports could simply state the issue, what we're doing to overcome the challenge, and how it's going. I mean, it seems it should be very simple, but here we are with this, I call it a highfalutin report that doesn't break it down for anyone to just plain understand. I want to hear just what I said. I want to hear what the problem is, what we're doing to address it. I don't, when we talk about disaggregating, for Christ's sakes, What does that mean to the average person? I need you to talk to me like I'm an average person. And I don't want to have to whip out my iPhone and start Googling during your presentation, Googling terminology. I just want to understand what the issue is and what we're doing about it. And we seem to just be backpedaling all the time. And I get so very frustrated from one year to the next. We seem to be doing better, but we're not really. So anyway, I'll stop there. I just need a better staff approach to this. This, oh, if I could throw it across the room, I would. This does not address what needs to be addressed in a way that is easily understood by the masses. And that's what we need, not a highfalutin report that, you have to Google terminology. At least I do. So I'll stop there. But, going forward, we got to do better than this. This is just disappointing from year to year.
Thank you for that comment. I think, before we close it, bears the, I think it deserves a little bit more brainstorming and review of what is our next step to identify improvements in the way we get reports or the way we dialogue about our program, or what else can we do to make sure that we're either getting the right information or ensuring that our programs are doing what we're expecting?
The very first thing out of the gate is don't put it on an agenda that's full. We've been here all day today, and we've cut short meetings because we couldn't get everything done during a meeting. So that's number one. Give us an agenda, a day where we can actually ponder and ruminate these issues. This is too important to just be pushing it on us and not allowing sufficient time to just ponder it. That's number one.
Director Coleman?
It would have been a different day had we had more time to deal with this. It could have been a very different day. But each agenda for each committee has been chock full. So we have not done this justice. We have not given it the time to do it justice. Or, better yet, we haven't given ourselves time to do it justice.
Director Coleman?
I happen to agree with a lot with what Lisa is saying, and to be honest, we get so many damn reports and studies that, yeah, I saw some of them 10, 20 years ago, and it just has a different date on it. Let's get past that point. If we're serious, we need to include more people, include more people from the workforce in these processes. And we do, as Lisa said, some of the things are too damn important just to put it on an agenda and hope that we have an hour to discuss it and make a determination. If there's something that important, we schedule another day, period.
So I wasn't present in the planning committee, the Legislative Human Resources Committee. It sounds like
some time to deal with it today.
Yes, it sounds like that, while the report was received and, that you've been able to prepare some of the questions that have been reiterated here at the full board, that, that there may need to be some real discussion continuing at the committee about what we actually are doing with the program beyond just receiving the report. I'll defer to the to the Leg HR committee members and chair about whether this should be scheduled, soon at the committee before the next annual report, because we need to do work on the programming, not just receiving reports. and we'll look to their recommendation about when to have this back on the full board for further discussion.
I think what Director McIntosh is saying is because planning ran long, we had to cut short Ledge HR, so we didn't have time to receive this report at Ledge HR. And so we need to do a better job scheduling all the committee meetings because, you know, one committee running late affects the other committee meetings.
And planning didn't cover one very important
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we can talk offline about scheduling for follow-up. It seems like this was really just a review of the data. We've received the report, but we need to do more work on gaps in the report potentially, and the next steps and the real outcomes.
President Katz, we have one public comment. We thought it was for 16. It's actually for this item.
Okay. So I think that those are comments from the board. Before I go to public comment, does anybody else on the board want to say anything before we hear from the public? Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the names.
That would be Yvette Rivera. Rolando, you have a public comment as well? Okay, so Yvette had her card in, and so Yvette will go first, and then we have Rolando Gonzalez. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to thank Lisa McIntosh, Marguerite Young, and John Coleman for saying something about this report. It was disturbing to hear some of these comments from the from the presenters and from the consultant that was hired to tell the district what a great job you're doing. To hear about the proportion of availability of minorities was upsetting. I'm glad that there's probably going to be a meeting in the future. Board members, just go out into the field where employees work, and you'll see that there is no longer a black woman plumber. The last woman plumber was either Felicia Collier, who is now deceased, may she rest in peace, and Joey Smith. To hear a consultant say, well, the availability of minorities, well, we live in a metropolitan area. Let's not count the data from Palm Springs or from Northern California or even from Sacramento, because I work for the County of Sacramento. We live in Oakland. I'm sorry, we're based in Oakland. So the data that was presented, I just want to remind everybody that there was a winner's report that came out, the horrors of the winner's report that came out after many years of similar reports that wanted to paint a glowing picture. And nothing has changed. So I want to ask that this board, I know that the board asks for memos all the time, and when you get a memo back, when you get a response to the memo, it really never really answers everything that you want. But I would say, ask Mr. Moten's group if they can give you a count of all the probationary employees that didn't pass their probation. Ask him for the percentage of Hispanic, Black, Asian, and women that didn't make it to full-time status in 2022 and 2023. I think there's quite a few in 2023. Ask Mr. Moten for the data of how many people quit before they became vested at the district, before 5 years. All of the Hispanic, Black, Asian, and women. Ask them how many didn't bother giving any feedback for an exit survey. And I'm sure the ones that filed complaints didn't. I'm going to just end by saying that Director Briggs behind me is in charge of one of the biggest departments of the district that has at least almost half of the district employees. And his data wasn't counted at the last meeting where Derry made a presentation. Go back and look at that winner's report to be reminded of how bad it is here for minorities, women, and those who have been retaliated against. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. We have a question from Director Coleman. Okay. Thank you.
Yvette raised a legitimate issue. Can we have a report on the questions that she raised in terms of the employees the last 5 years who didn't make it to vesting for what and the different reasons? I don't remember verbatim what she said, but she was on target. I would like to see something like that, and I would hope it would go to the board, at least to Ledge HR, for discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, we did provide a memo that includes some of the information, but
Some of it, but it was
Yvette's
pretty.
asking
It was
for
pretty.
some additional information.
To be honest, I looked at it and there weren't that many employees listed in the thing. I want something more comprehensive.
For that same period, for the last 5 years that we showed?
Yeah, but I mean, her focus was on 2022 and 2023 in the categories.
Okay, let me.
My reaction is that the retention data is an important indicator, and I think I would wait. Both are important, but I think I am more interested, without having seen both sets. I think I'm more interested in the pre-probation, past probation, because I think that's when it's a really critical period to have support for a new worker, and to be able to identify whether we're having disparate outcomes. I think is important to be able to investigate and make corrections if we see any disparities that we find the ability to correct. But the numbers are just numbers. They're an important introduction. They're an important temperature check. But I think what's more important than, while the temperature check and to see the trends is quite important, it's just as important to really be looking at the qualitative information behind those numbers. If we have exit interview information or other data that would actually show, not necessarily like numerical data, but a way to understand why trends are happening and what root causes that we could intervene on. I think that would be helpful for us to have.
So Andy, are you saying the request I had is null and void? Because the request I had, I think is appropriate, at least to go to Ledge HR committee.
And I agree with you, John.
Oh, no, I was adding to the scope of what I think is important, so that I hope that's clear. So I'm
come across when you're talking, at least for me.
Oh, yeah, I believe I had just referred to the scope of data that we would be considering when, as a whole, whatever portion of the district staff or board is reviewing the issue. I was agreeing with the data set that Ms. Rivera was bringing to us and adding my view on how we would use that data.
Okay. And will we get the data? I know our next Ledge HR meeting is not for a month. It'd be nice to get it more than the weekend before the meeting, so we have an ample time to look at it and review it and ask questions, make educated questions if they're necessary.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly prepare the report in advance. We'd have to send it probably as an info memo, and then we have the committee memo because those go out the week before the meeting. So we'll look at the timing of that. But what I'm also hearing you is you want to dedicate maybe an entire Ledge HR meeting to this particular topic here.
I think it's worthy of that.
And both, what I'm also hearing is you want to present it in a way that's both understandable, but also I've also heard some of the board members also talking about you also want to look into the data because the data is important too. So we'll try to find that right balance.
And I don't think there's any reason that we can only discuss DEI efforts whenever we have a once-a-year annual report presented. I think anytime the committee wants to hear and review, DEI efforts, we should do so. That's why we have a committee devoted to it.
I do have a question for Janella. I mean, is there a need to, I mean, the action is to adopt the report. Is there a requirement for us to adopt it today, or is there a legal requirement that we have to adopt it today?
I believe that we just have to have it on record by June, the end of June, for just OFCCP compliance requirements. So.
That
We-
means we don't
have to do
approve
it today.
We can do it. We have one more meeting that we can present this at.
If we are, with respect to staff time, if we find that this is a compliant report, I defer to my colleagues and the staff on, the compliance of the report versus what I think is, just as, if not more important, which is the actions that we take in response to it. But to clarify, if we were to have improvements in the issue that I raised, I was disappointed that we don't have the same data sets for figure 2 on page 21 and figure 5 on page 23, just to have apples to apples for the calendar year and the aggregated versus disaggregated. So it seems like we have, disaggregated for 22 and disaggregated for 23, but not the cross amounts. May not be a defect in the report for legal compliance, but it's important information, and I think it makes the report on that particular issue more understandable. So I would request that, whether it's an amendment to the report or a companion memo, that's the information I was looking for.
We have one more person for public comment.
Yes, hi, members of the board. My name is Rolando Gonzalez. I'm a community affairs rep for EBMUD. This weekend, I was at the Cinco de Mayo festival in Richmond, and the question of how do I get employed by EBMUD came up a lot. And so I told them, every Monday, the district posts jobs. What they said to me was actually kind of eye-opening. They said, you know what, it's kind of daunting because the descriptions are very technical, and they're in English. So while we can speak English, their understanding of the written English language was a barrier sometimes to them to apply for these positions they were interested in. So I would recommend that perhaps in the future they should consider having the application or the job description in other languages besides English, because to them it was a little bit hard to understand. They were interested in working. There was a gentleman that was interested in being a carpenter. And he said that he had looked at some of the jobs, but he wasn't sure if he was understanding what the requirements were, so he did not apply. And that came up quite often in my conversations with them, so I would say that you should consider perhaps putting some of this information in other languages so applicants can understand, what you're asking for. And that's it.
Thank you. Director Young may have a question.
It's a comment, actually.
Thank you for your comment.
And a good one. Several of our locals routinely provide all of their information in multiple languages. And, fortunately, and I don't know whether Rolando would agree with me or not, but their philosophy is that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And in terms of interpretation and translation of materials, and that there are now widgets that are available to put on any electronic document that can translate into, I don't know, a gajillion languages, as many as you want, that you just put at the top of the, document and, it translates. Now, maybe we should pay for translation into Spanish. It does get expensive, no doubt, but and it takes more time to send out for translation. But I think it's totally, worth it.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that we shared at the committee meeting about the Title VI requirements that does have language translation requirements. So we've been looking at those exact widgets that can help people when they get to our website, just pick the language they want to get translated in. That will be a requirement.
We have an additional public comment. Joey Smith.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm not going to belabor this because I do believe every board member knows pretty much where I stand on these types of reports. I understand that they're just reporting the information that they have. They're not in the position to make the hirings. But I am in the position to give you a little bit of the history of how things have changed, because Yvette's right. I think there was one other Black female that got hired after I left the field, but I don't even think she lasted 2 years. We used to go to Perry's elementary school and introduce the young children, and they would see women actually working in non-traditional fields. In fact, I have a direct connection with the vice principal. Just met her a couple Sundays ago and was telling her what we were doing. And they said, well, where are all y'all now? PIO used to make it a priority for us to go to the schools. And the Affirmative Action Office, is what it was called back then, also had the funds and the directive to make sure that we went out there, whether it was me, Suzanne Christensen, or any other person who was or was not a white male working in the field. Thankfully, we're starting to have some uptick as far as our engineers around here being of other nationalities, other representations than white male. But we have not been able to move forward. What do they say? Garbage in, garbage out. If you work with the same status quo stuff and you don't think beyond it, and you don't include the people who are actually the subject matter experts because they're living it, then you get this. And I know that people have to pick up from where they're at, but there's a way. And the way to move forward is to listen, be brave, be humble, be willing to work together in ways that people can provide. We're not trying to do other people's jobs, but we definitely, I personally do not, I've been here 30 years and I do not want to leave here with East Bay Mud not at least being as good as it was when I first came. This is an us thing. It's not only us, but we're here, and I'm willing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Patterson.
I'm happy to hear the response that's coming now. And I don't want to belabor today because I think we have to come back, regroup, and re-understand. A long time ago, I came to the city of Oakland. They didn't have a Black or Hispanic lifeguard in this whole city. And when I was put in charge of sports, aquatics, secondary schools, I recruited young men and women to be lifeguards and fill the void because I went out amongst them. And many of them got their college education with the skill of a lifeguard. That's just the beginning. We got workforce development, money from the state, standing in the wings. I was looking at the governor the other day talking about it. And making that available and providing people who are in the local workforce development operations. I mentioned Urban Strategies Council. These are some of the outreach groups that you have to get to create what you need, and that is a pool of people who can fill the void that we have. It's that simple. Gentrification has changed the landscape and the methods that we used to use to do things. We have to find new ways of doing that, and we have to put in place infrastructure. We're not the only ones with the problem. That's what I'm saying. A lot of agencies and cities and whatnot have similar problems. We got to put our resources and our best people together to reach the young people and help develop a coming. The last of the groups that I sponsored when I was on a playground in Oakland that came to East Bay Mud have all died out. And they had a family investment because you used to have brothers and families that were involved in East Bay Mud, in the very roots of it. I'm just giving you the history and background. And that's what I was hoping through this program we would get back to. Not that we have to sponsor 100% of it, but we can be leaders in bringing together, and there's lots of resources that are already standing by that can do this. So I just mentioned that to say there's a way out, and we got to take time and find it, and we'll not only solve our problem, we'll solve the problem of the people who we're here to help. That's what I want to say.
I want to thank everybody for a good discussion and turn it over to the general manager for any closing comments.
No, I mean, I think I've heard it pretty clearly from the board what you're asking for. So we'll come back next month to the committee to provide additional information. We'll get the information to you sooner so you have time to digest some of the information, and we'll continue this discussion.
Thank you. Let's move on to general manager's report, number 15.
Attached is just general manager's report, and certainly can answer any questions if you have any.
Okay. Seeing no questions, any public comment, we will move to item 16, committee reports. And the minutes from the April 25th, 2023 Finance Administration Committee were included in your packet. We will now receive reports from this morning's Planning Committee and Legislative Human Resources Committee meetings. Director Linney.
Yes, we had an update on the Los Vaqueros expansion project. Reviewed the many different agreements that are in process there, discussed the off-ramps for things, should we agree or not agree to go forward at various times. We also talked about the timeline overall for some of these decisions. We had a second item, the paving amendment that was in the agenda for the consent calendar this morning, and an explanation of kind of where we're at right now. And finally, we had an item to discuss the PLA situation, the labor agreements. We did not have time to have a presentation on that, but we had a number of speakers, both from the labor trades as well as from the non-labor contractors, discussing what will no doubt turn out to be an interesting and somewhat controversial subject when we come back to the next planning committee.
Thank you, Director McIntosh.
The Legislative Human Resources Committee met this morning, and we considered positions on AB 735, the Workforce Development and Utility Careers, and AB 1423, Product Safety, PFAS, Artificial Turf, Synthetic Surfaces, and received information on water rights modernization legislation and an update on other East Bay Mud issues. There was a unanimous vote to support AB 735 as well as AB 1423. And finally, we received a strategic plan update on our diversity, equity, and inclusion program.
Thank you, directors. We move to number 7. Are there any public comments on item 16?
No public comment.
Okay. We move to item 17, other items for future consideration. Please submit items for future consideration to the general manager. We move to item 18, director comments. Thank you if you have already submitted your written comments to the secretary. Are there any verbal director comments? All right, well then the next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023 at 1:15 p.m. I understand that we will be showcasing our new boardroom on that day. Very exciting. And with that, this meeting is now adjourned.